All right, I think we are good to go. What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again on the Cave every Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I've been doing the Cave live show. I bring a guest on. You guys are seeing me to get the gist now that I've been doing it for a few weeks now, and I'm very, very excited to be presenting you with the fourth episode, the fourth installment of the Cave. And as I start to really iron out the wrinkles with this whole thing, and you guys have been sticking with me, and I appreciate all the support with it, and I've been having a blast doing it. And it seems like, unless my guests have been lying to me, that they're also enjoying it as well. So this week I have a very, very special guest, and I'm very excited to bring her on. Robyn Mundy is a editor-in-chief of the BuffaloFAMBase Network. She's been one of the OG Bills Mafia members. I'll give you the whole spotlight in just a second. Where can I pull that up? I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. So that's where we'll start, of course, as always, every single week before I bring my guest on. We're going to start with the guest spotlight. Robyn is, as I mentioned, the editor-in-chief of the BuffaloFAMBase. She's an OG Bills Mafia member. The term Bills Mafia that's been coined for, our fan base, she was part of the, originators when this terminology came around. So that's something you really can't find. That's a very unique thing to have as a Bills fan, of course. And she's an original Josh Allen disciple, which I really want to have her explain when I bring her on. And of course, you can find her on Twitter at Robyn Mundy, WYO. Without further ado, let's bring on Robyn. We're going to bring on the guest spotlight, pull that off. Robyn, welcome to the Cave. I'm very excited to have you on.
Yes, and I'm very excited to be here. So excited. I had to dress up for the occasion.
She's setting a big standard for the next guest. I already told her before the show.
Tough shoes to fill.
Okay. All right. So, Robyn, as I mentioned in the guest spotlight, the Josh Allen disciple thing, because when we were talking on draft night for the second round, you were explaining to everybody how you were, watching him at Wyoming, and you saw him come in, and you kind of watched him go through his development process, and you kind of were one of the first believers in him. And that's kind of hard to at least present with evidence. There's probably a good amount of people out there that want to, try and say as much as they want that they believed in Josh Allen or that they knew he'd be good and they weren't upset with the pick. I'm not one of those people at all. So I know that it's very hard to present evidence that you were, but you brought a strong case, and it's very interesting of a story. And I thought it'd be cool for you to share with the people watching the Cave as to your story with Josh Allen.
It's kind of an interesting story because it goes and ties in with my own personal life as well. Mm-hmm. So for the first half of my life, I was born and raised and grew up in Springville in Western New York, south of Buffalo. And when I graduated from college, I left and I moved out west, and I ended up in Wyoming 30 years ago. And when I came to Wyoming, I really was the only fan. I mean, I'm serious. I don't think there were more than a handful of Bills fans at that point in time, because that was right around the time when we were about to lose our fourth Super Bowl. And that was so much fun, moving into the heart of Broncos country.
Yeah.
So remember that later on when we have this conversation, when I started talking about my hot take. But at any rate, so half my life as a Buffalo Bills fan growing up in Western New York, half of my life all over the place, mostly in Wyoming, living in this country, getting harassed by Broncos fans relentlessly. And the one thing that we did share in common was I got kind of into the University of Wyoming Cowboy football team. And I liked them because they reminded me a lot of UB, kind of well, they don't win very often, and they're blah blah blah, and UB's gotten much better, Cowboys have gotten much better. So I started watching Cowboys football, and along comes Josh Allen, and he's in his sophomore year. And reading up on the situation, I'm like, I thought we had some other guy that was coming in at quarterback, and apparently he reneged on Wyoming at the last moment, and the coach had to find a quarterback. So they went to Fresno State. They were recruiting somebody, and got a phone call and said, head over to Firebaugh and see this, quarterback over in Fireball while you're there.
Mhm.
So they go over there, they take one look at his arm, and they're like, ding, 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 because he had played at Reedley Community College at that point.
Mhm.
And I think he had, I don't know, 5,000 yards or something like that in that year he played at community college. So he comes to Wyoming. He's a sophomore. Everybody's all excited. In the second game, he breaks his clavicle and he's out for the rest of the year. So that was, because you could just see in the first game and a half that he was in, that this kid was just throwing the football all over the place. Now, remember that Laramie, Wyoming is 7,200 feet above sea level. So the air is very thin, and he could hurl the football, but he was such a noodle. He was 6'2", I believe, at that point, and he probably weighed right around 205 pounds, maybe. And he had feet like a clown, man. He just going all over the place. His mechanics were absolutely horrible, but you could just all of a sudden you see him throw the football, and it's like, what? And then he had this sideline presence that we all know about now,
Yes.
the swag and, the personality and all of that. And you could see it. You could see it in him right at that point in time. So early on, it was like people just kind of gravitated to him. The players, they rallied around him. Then he had his junior year, and that was his best year. That was the year he had Tanner Gentry. I think he had Jake Hollister then. As well, and his numbers were off the rails, and that's when everybody started looking at him and going, ooh, maybe he'd be good in the draft, blah blah blah. Senior year, his numbers weren't quite as good because he lost a couple guys, and then he got to the point where he went to the combine. I think he looked pretty good at the combine. Of course, he comes out and throws this just like long bomb, and people in Buffalo were kind of enchanted with Josh Rosen. Lots of folks were. Okay. And
I hate to admit it.
I understood that because he was a safe pick. He was projected. He had all of the measurables that you could want. And I felt the same way kind of about Baker Mayfield. I thought they were the two that had, and Sam Darnold, these were the guys that were, in my opinion, pro-ready. Nobody ever wanted to say that Josh Allen was pro-ready. Right. He was not pro-ready. The good thing was he did play in a pro-style offense at the University of Wyoming, and that was good for him. But people in Buffalo, New York, and I say that because we have a Buffalo, Wyoming, about 30 miles from where I live, weren't buying into it. And I think in part, it's kind of like groupthink. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, you hear all the pundits and they're all out there talking about Rosen and Darnold and, Josh can't do this and his accuracy is bad. And I think sometimes we get too enamored with what the pseudo experts say. And I think a lot of that, there was bad press for Josh, and the poor kid, and this is the other thing a lot of people didn't realize, he sent out 998 letters.
I remember hearing that.
To colleges, and nobody was interested in him. And he ends up in Wyoming, which, trust me when I tell you, the University of Wyoming football program isn't the SEC.
Right.
Not even close. And so here comes Josh. He does all this stuff. The draft comes along. And of course, we're all hearing about all these other guys and everything. And I have to say, I was mortally offended when in the field house, because I heard it, when we selected Josh Allen and you could hear the boos.
Yeah.
And it was embarrassing. It was probably, I have to say, the worst moment I've ever had as a Bills fan, because I felt like, that was really unfair. And I don't know why he seemed always to polarize people. It didn't make sense to me. He's a good kid. He's raw, but, he's not the devil incarnate and, whatever. But you would think I mean, people were very passionate about their feelings one way or the other with him. So that's what kind of it ticked me off. And so I was doing my own little Twitter thing and, refuting people trashing him, basically calling him trash and worse, and just saying, hey, give the guy a chance. Well, how many quarterbacks do you know that could have got thrown into the pro game the way Josh did? And without playing for an SEC program, he goes from playing at the University of Wyoming to playing in the NFL, his first year, which that wasn't the plan.
No, it was not.
Thank you, Nathan Peter. But that could have destroyed, a lot of quarterbacks getting thrown in way too soon, whatever. Josh, he always had that mindset of bring it on, let's go. I'll do it. Throw whatever you want to throw at me. And that's been kind of my history with Josh Allen. And so I was a champion for him from the get-go. I said at the draft time that Baker Mayfield I thought was a safer pick. But Josh ended up in the right situation because I think if the Jets drafted him, I'm not sure he wouldn't have flamed out.
I agree. Wholeheartedly. I think if anybody, to be fair, I think if anybody went to the Jets at that time, they probably have their career ruined too. So, I mean, even the Josh Allens and Patrick Mahomes of the world, I mean, there was no getting out of there.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting. And the reason why that story, when you were telling it the other day, it stuck with me because, and I guess it's not exactly the same, but when Jack Eichel, I have this godforsaken jersey still sitting behind me, even after everything that's gone down. Yeah. So I was just a slightly off topic, but somewhat related story. When Ryan Miller was still with the Sabres, he was like, the guy I always looked up to, my favorite player. I loved him. So when he left, it was heartbreaking for me because hockey's, my main sport, ironically enough. I love hockey probably more than I do love football, but I was enamored with Ryan Miller. So when he left, of course, I was heartbroken. And I kind of felt like, at that time, I was still relatively younger. And I was like looking for another player, not only just a team, but to attach myself to. So Jack Eichel came along. And granted, he wasn't, Connor McDavid, and he wasn't, necessarily facing the most adversity because he was the number 2 overall pick. And, he was supposed to be great, of course, in comparison to Josh, at least. But that's who I latched on to. And after, everything that went down, and watching him kind of grow up in Buffalo, and, his first career game, his first career goal, how many points he had, watching his, rise to stardom, it kind of stuck with me. And, I guess it somewhat relates, but in the same fashion that, you saw Josh Allen at his, lowest, if you will, when he was at Wyoming, you saw him develop, you saw him grow up. That's kind of the way I was viewing Jack Eichel. And, now that he's gone and things have gone differently between the two. But, that early development part of it is something that I feel like I cherish watching Jack Eichel. And part of the reason why I still have his jersey up behind me. So it kind of stuck. So I did want to share that because it definitely seemed like it resonated in just a little bit. I never got into the Allen trade until Thanksgiving Day. I think this was the game that Josh Allen really enamored the entire nation, not just Buffalo, but this is the quarterback sneak that he picked the ball. He fumbled it, picked it back up, and then went across the line on the 4th down. I think that was when everybody truly realized that Josh Allen, he had a certain fire under his ass that I don't think we really realized at the time. But in any event, there's still a lot that we have to talk about tonight. We're already 15 minutes in, and we're just blabbering on about all sorts of stuff. But let's move on. We're going to move on to the recent events. And there's a ton that has gone down, of course, because the NFL draft just happened just a couple of days ago, of course. And that's what we're going to kick it off with, the NFL draft. What are your initial thoughts, your initial reactions to the draft, not just with the Bills, but just in general with any teams, who did good, who did bad? What are your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was an interesting draft. The Patriots draft really confused me. The first couple of rounds when they selected players that were projected to go much later. I thought that was kind of strange. I don't know what to make of that with the Patriots, though. They're mysterious to me. Overall, I thought the Bills did very well. They accomplished what they needed to accomplish. They got a corner, I think a good one. Um, and they let the draft come to them. They traded back when they could. I think, it's so different to have Brandon Bean, a guy that you just can't wait to see what he's going to do next because you don't know. But I think that he's done a really fine job in turning the whole organization around. The rest of the AFC East, Miami's, they're going to be a problem. And we've talked about that some on draft night too, but it's honestly the Jets. I think they knocked their draft out of the park. And the people that are thinking they're going to be the same, whatever, 3-14 team, I don't think so. I think this year, Zach Wilson is probably going to take that step if they can get some protection for him up front. I think they're going to be much improved. Miami, their draft, they didn't have an early draft pick because they gave those all away for Tyreek Hill, right?
Yes, right.
Well, Tyreek Hill is going to be a problem for sure, but that's why we wanted somebody like Elam, right?
I think Kyer Elam, he matches that. It seems like the theme of this draft for the AFC, the theme of the offseason for pretty much any team, but the AFC East specifically is speed. And that's why I think partially why the Patriots reached for Tyquan Thornton, because he's the super fast speedster. We drafted Kyer Elam. He runs pretty fast 40 himself. The Dolphins brought in Tyreek Hill. The Jets brought in, who did the Jets bring? Who did they draft? I think it was Garrett Wilson. They drafted Garrett Wilson. He's pretty fast. So it seems like that was really the theme of this draft, and the AFC East specifically. It's speed, because you can't teach it. And I remember Mookie hopped on, the draft night, and I think it was easy to ask him a question. What do you value, like pretty much speed or the other physical attributes? And Mookie was like, speed. Speed is what matters in this league, and that's what it's kind of turning into. And he's right. I mean, speed it's just an enamoring aspect of a player that you cannot get out of anybody. So. I really think, which is something we'll also touch on in a little bit, another thought I had. But, yeah, you're right. Kyer Elam is a piece that I think we were missing from our secondary for sure. So the second piece of recent events news, I'm not sure if you caught, this one happened today, actually. A couple things happened today, but this was the biggest one that stuck out. But Deandre Hopkins suspended 6 games for using performance-enhancing drugs that went against the drug policy for the NFL. And my thoughts when I first saw this, and this was something that I kind of been mulling with ever since he missed the last 5 games of last season, because now DeAndre Hopkins has missed, once the suspension is over, he'll have missed 11 consecutive games between last season and this season. And I know a lot of people used to think he was a unanimous top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, and I still think that's a fair statement to make. But I think if you were to ask, the average NFL fan, they probably would forget about him and probably leave him out of that conversation nowadays. And at this point, DeAndre Hopkins, once his 6-game suspension is over, I'm kind of thinking between that and I feel like he really hasn't been exactly how he used to be in Houston. I don't think he's been fitting the Cardinals as well as I think they'd hoped. I'm kind of thinking we might have seen the last of prime DeAndre Hopkins, even though he did have a Hail Mary catch. I don't know if we're going to be seeing that same DeAndre Hopkins that we've seen before.
I agree with you. And that's an interesting statement. And it's odd, he's come out with, well, they all do, we deny, whatever it was. But weren't there some kind of unusual substances that were involved?
He used I want to say a beaver tranquilizer or something like that. Literally, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I think it was like some sort of weird animal tranquilizer. I don't know how that happens or works, but yeah, that's what you're alluding to. Yes.
Yeah, well, it does make you wonder. It's like, okay, what is in a beaver tranquilizer that set off a drug test? Because usually they don't test for beaver tranquilizers, but. Right. I'm not sure, but at any rate, it's a heck of a question, isn't it? Because he got 6 games for that. And was that the appropriate amount of games, do you think?
That's the other part of the conversation that everybody's starting to heat up. We're watching Calvin Ridley get suspended for at least a year by the NFL for betting in the eyes of some people as a fan, as his team played and he didn't. And then DeAndre Hopkins gets 6 games for Pokemon says it was for healing purpose after a game, for his injury, I guess.
Oh, healing purposes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, I guess.
Was.
Yeah, it had to have some sort of purpose. You don't just inject yourself with that. But yeah, I mean, what do they do with Deshaun Watson? Because I think it was Justice actually that posed the question, like, does he get less? Does DeAndre Hopkins end up getting more games suspended than Deshaun Watson? And I mean, that would be one hell of a catastrophe if they managed to screwed that up. They gave and I think it was last week I had Z-Bot from the Fanatics on, and he said he sees Deshaun Watson getting 4 to 5 games. So if he comes close to his prediction, then I mean, I don't even think Deshaun Watson should be playing the season, but that's my opinion. And I'm pretty sure my realistic estimate will be 8 to 9 games. But I mean, if it's less than what DeAndre Hopkins got, that's just another bad look to slap onto all of the other instances that the NFL has screwed up in the past.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I feel I really have a lot of empathy for Cleveland Browns fans that are mortified by this. And Cleveland Browns fans are a lot like us. These are people that are born into it, and it's a life affliction. and and you have your team. It's something I feel good about now too, in the sense that I like the fact that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott put character issues kind of high up on the list,
Yep.
because you don't want these guys that are in these incredible roles on your team that are not good people.
I totally agree. And when your quarterback is supposed to be the leader of a locker room, somebody that everybody's supposed to rally around. I mean, I can't imagine every single player that's going to be on the Browns roster this season is going to be entirely buying into their so-called, leader at this point. And this was a conversation that when, he was being rumored to Miami, when he was always being talked about, Dolphins might trade for him. Dolphins might trade for him. It seemed like that conversation was coming up every, month and a half or so. And it's like, if I were I was saying, throughout that time period, if I were a Dolphins fan or even a Dolphins player, even though Tua might not be the saving grace here, if I had, a guy like Deshaun Watson walking into my locker room mid-season and I'm supposed to suddenly buy into this guy that's got all this, stuff surrounding him, I'm not necessarily sure I'm on that train, especially after what they did to Ryan Fitzpatrick. But that's another conversation. Am I supposed to sit here and buy into this? So, and I can't imagine everybody with Cleveland, in that locker room is, but unfortunately, the reality is going to set in eventually that they're going to have to, that's who they went with at the end of the day. If they want to win games, that's who the franchise has put in front of them. And what can you do at the end of the day? It's really unfortunate. I guess it's just,
It truly is unfortunate. And to me, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because the minute there's any adversity, I think that could be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of those things where, if things don't go perfectly well, if Deshaun, hypothetically, I mean, looking at it from a football perspective, if Deshaun Watson comes on the field, if he even gets suspended at all, he starts to play for the Browns and, he's nowhere near what he used to be. I mean, then the Browns look, not that it should matter, but, it does. The Browns will look even worse. Like, you traded God knows how much. You traded you mortgaged your whole future for this guy that already had all this surrounding him. And you brought him in to, win. And now he's not even doing that for you. So you're going through this entire PR nightmare, ruining your fan base, throwing your locker room out the window, and he can't even win you games. So, I mean, this is really something that could backfire horrendously. And, a franchise that went through such a long period of misery and struggle, it really could set them back tremendously. If, hypothetically, if the league goes out and suspends him for 2 years, I mean, who knows? They might come out of left field with a suspension here. So there's so many ways this can backfire. And not only did they mortgage their entire household and future for him, they paid him $250 million guaranteed. So
and guaranteed need how much? Like,
it's so screwed up in so many different ways. And DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley are, going to be suspended for, a third of the year and then for an entire season for things that, in the minds of most, or what should be all people, are not morally incorrect. But yeah, that's that. That's the recent events that have happened as of late. We can move on. The next thing we got here on the Cave, we're going to move into the Q&A. The Q&A is pretty simple. Question and answer. I'm going to have a question for you. You're going to answer the question.
Okay.
Question number 1. What would your draft grade be for the Buffalo Bills?
I've thought about it, and I would give them a B+. I think it was above average. I think you have to take into context, and a lot of people aren't, that there were very specific things that, excuse me, the Bills were looking for. They only had a couple of, probably 2-3 positions that may even make the roster. So the draft may be, different than if you're building from the ground up. And I think you have to kind of keep that in mind. I like that, a lot of people went nuts the night that Brandon Beane moved up two places and gave away a 4th round pick. I didn't have any problem with that. And just like I thought he would come back, move back, and acquire more picks. He tried to get back into the 4th round and couldn't, but we ended up with Shakir anyway. So, and that pick, by the way, I don't know what you think, but I think that pick just is going to be like a Gabriel Davis cool kind of pick.
Oh, I mean, I personally, I made a mock draft, and Shakir was actually the only player that I got, mocked to the Bills right. I had him actually coming to the Bills in the 3rd round, and he somehow fell to the 5th. I mean, it could not have gotten better in terms of value with Khalil Shakir. And your B+ is very, I think it's very grounded, and I think a lot of fans would be, we were talking about it before the show. I think the draft for the Bills was very favored for the public opinion, for lack of a better term. It's hard to hate it. And I think people would be very quick to say, oh, A+, we got punt god, we got the corner we needed, we got a running back. And, an A+ in my mind, it's got to be perfect. And nobody's going to be perfect on draft night. And, whether you're looking at it in hindsight after you see how all the players play out, or you're looking at it right now, it's very tough to find, the perfect draft. And, even though I had no problem with Brandon Beane trading up 2 spots to get Kyrie Elam, I think an A+ would have required for him to stay where he was at 25 and somehow still land Kyrie Elam, which I do think is possible. But like I said, it doesn't mean I have a problem with it. But I would have given it an A-. I think B+, A- is pretty yeah, pretty much the same. And I think it's very grounded, in removing the bias from it. And I know a lot of Bills fans would have a problem doing that, but I think an A- or a B+ is very fair.
Part of the reason I would give a B+ or an A-, a slight demerit, and it's slight, is interior offensive line. I would have liked to have seen us maybe get a player, a little earlier in the draft. But I'm not going to nitpick about that, because the other thing is you have to let the draft come to you, and sometimes it's going to come to you in your favor, and sometimes it isn't. The players just fall a certain way, and it didn't work out for them to get one early, and okay, so move on.
Right. And I completely agree. And that was a point that I honestly didn't even, think about. I could have thought an interior offensive line would have been one of higher on the priority list for the Buffalo Bills in this coming draft. And the board played out how it did, and they went about their business the way they did, and I have no problem with it. But I do think or at least I did think it was a little bit higher on the priority list. And the other thing that I did want to mention, I don't hate the Terrell Bernard pick. I actually think it's pretty infatuating, I guess, just for the way that I thought we were going about this draft. And pretty much every other pick is exactly the way we went about it, is, going for guys that we knew for sure were going to make this roster. And I thought for a 3rd round pick, and not saying that Bernard has a bad chance of making the roster, but, I do think out of the guys we drafted, he's probably more so on the bubble in comparison to the first 2 guys that we drafted, or, even Shakir. I think Shakir is probably a lock to make this roster. He's, he was a 5th round pick. So it's a little bit hard to say how he's going to play out. I do think there's a lot of avenues where it does work for the Buffalo Bills, and that's what's so genius about Brandon Beane. Once I did a little bit of homework and, the true experts released all their thoughts and opinions on it, I was like, wow, this actually is an overly smart pick for the Buffalo Bills. I just thought it may have been a tad bit early to be doing that. But still,
it could be. I was wondering about, you said that he's kind of taking AJ Klein's spot. I think even though he might have been a little early, he's going to be a special teams player, right?
That was the big avenue. So he's supposedly going to come onto the team, probably primarily as a special teamer. And something I read was that if he comes on the team and he makes his roster, and he can replace Tyler Makovecich as well, and that would, if we were able to cut him. I'm not hoping we cut anybody, but of course, if he was on the way out, we saved about like $2.5 million in cap space on top of it. So just another way that Brandon Beane is finding a way to cut a corner.
I forgot who said this, and I wish I could remember who it was, but somebody suggested that because he's such a tweener, that if things don't work out with Poyer, he might switch to safety. What would you think of that?
I mean, that was another thing. Like, this guy is so athletic, his freak athleticism. That's the name of Brandon Beane's, drafting. He always is going for somebody that could do multiple things. Versatility is the name of the game for Brandon Beane, and this guy sounds like he can do it all. I think he had like 983 coverage snaps at Baylor, and he didn't get a single touchdown. And for a linebacker, that's pretty damn good. For somebody that primarily played linebacker. So if he's that athletic and he's able to step back and, especially in the secondary that I really think we're going to have in the future, having a guy like Terrell Bernard hypothetically step back in the secondary if he makes a mistake or two, and Micah Hyde's still beside him and Tre'Davious White's in front of him or Kyrie Elam's in front of him, they'll be there to bail him out. So that would be a very interesting avenue for him to go down as well.
I heard, when I heard that or read it, I thought, wow, that's interesting, because who knows, that might be their plan.
It might be. And, Jordan Poyer's future, I think it's still up in the air. I know there's still, a handful of Bills fans that believe that Jordan Poyer is, he's a lock for this future of this team. And, as much as I want to believe so, it's a business. And unfortunately, things don't work that way. And there's still other guys that need to be paid. And paying a 30-year-old safety, top of the line money is not necessarily in the plans of a team that wants to go out and win a Super Bowl ASAP. So, Jordan Poyer's future's up in the air. Maybe Terrell Bernard. That's why we took him so high. Maybe he's in the plans of going back in the secondary. But, like we mentioned, the genius of Brandon Beane works in a multitude of ways.
Well put.
All right. So the second, which we kind of already touched on because we've been talking about the draft quite a bit, but who in your opinion had the best draft and who in your opinion had the worst draft?
I didn't really look at everybody's draft, so I'm going to probably be somewhat limited to the ones that I was interested in. I thought the Jets had the best. I thought the board fell to them, but they moved with the flow of the draft very well. And to me, the worst that I saw was the Patriots. I don't know what Belichick is doing. But you know what? With all of his rings, he's kind of earned, the opportunity to have us doubt him, I guess. He gets the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know what he's doing because I think his first two picks were very strange.
Yes, very strange indeed. And you mentioned, I would agree, the Jets definitely had the best draft. And I've done a little bit of homework. I think the Patriots still come out on top as having the worst draft, or at least the most questionable. Bada Bing says, Jets did very well. Jets and Eagles had very good drafts. I think the Jets, the Eagles, and the Giants were three teams that I really thought knocked it out of the park. The Eagles went ahead and instead of drafting somebody that could become, their next receiver, they just go out and get one of the receivers that everybody's trying to emulate on their team, and they get AJ Brown, and that's remarkable for them. And for a team that's in a questionable conference, questionable division, it's up in the air. And the Cowboys ended on such an awful note and had such a brutal offseason that who knows if they're going to be able to bounce back.
That whole division is, who knows?
Yeah, who knows is right. I mean, I think that division's as up in the air as any division. The AFC West is very up in the air because all the teams are very good, but the NFC East is up in the air because all the teams could be questionably horrible. So it's funny how it goes both ways. And I almost think Brian Dable and Joe Shane's Giants could be right in that discussion too.
I absolutely think so.
And
Absolutely.
Kayvon Thibodeau they brought in.
They had a good draft.
They did. They had a silently good draft as well, and it's getting overlooked by drafts like the Jets. But they had a great draft as well. Pokemon says, gotta say it, the Chiefs. They had so many picks. I think it's good that the Jets got competitive, but the Chiefs have stayed competitive. I mean, that's fair too. I think the Chiefs had a very solid draft as well. I was a big fan of Trent McDuffie, and they traded up and stole him at 21, and that one broke my heart. But of course, it had to be the Chiefs switching with the Patriots.
Of course.
Yeah. Of course is right, but I think that's a very good opinion too. The Chiefs have drafted well over the past 2 years. They had a few players last year that they drafted and make an immediate impact on the roster. So I think the Chiefs have been doing a solid job in that category as well. And going off of that tangent, really, it kind of rolls right into the third question. Is Bill Belichick, in your opinion, a top 10 general manager in the NFL?
No. And the reason I say that is because if you go to his draft history, and over particularly the last 5 years, I think, who has he drafted? How many wide receivers has he drafted? And none of them seem to turn out. So as a general manager, no, I don't think he's a top 10. And he's also, okay, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to my elderly status here, but he's older and I don't think he's necessarily moving as rapidly into trend setting as he did when he was younger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I gotcha. And it's an interesting thing to say because it does seem like Bill Belichick's still kind of grasping onto his gut when it comes to things general manager wise. Like I think, Tyquan Thornton was a pick that, he feels in his gut is going to turn out, but the analytics or the experts and, where he could have gotten him at say that, he could have been drafted later, but Bill Belichick's probably hard set on it, in his opinions, like Tyquan's going to be good. I'm going to be able to turn him into what I need him to be. And I'm going to take him wherever I want. And he could end up being a good pick, but at the end of the day, it was still too early.
It was. I mean, when you can still have had that pick, a couple of rounds later, you have to wonder about that. But, and I kind of relate to this in terms of being older. You get set in your ways, and you get tunnel vision and you trust your gut. And sometimes your gut isn't always right. And it'll be interesting to see how this season goes for him because I'm not a giant fan of McCorkle. But if they could go either way this year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them have a down year, especially because our division, I think, for the first time in quite some time, is going to be very competitive.
Oh yeah, and other than for the Bills, well, and the Dolphins, who you'd like to assume with all that weaponry is going to be, still very, very good. Between the Jets and the Patriots, and that kind of, is Bada Bing Crosby's question. Did the Jets lead the Patriots division-wise? So you'd say that they're going to, Patriots finish last in the division this year?
Yeah, I think the Jets will have a better record than the Patriots. I think that's entirely possible.
Definitely.
Entirely possible.
If all the players that the Jets took this season, they somehow all of them come on and make an immediate impact, and like you mentioned, Zach Wilson does take that extra step. I know you said that earlier. They easily could be overtaking the Patriots. The Patriots, I thought, they made it, but I don't think they did anything special last season to make the playoffs. They had a relatively good year, but they got hot, at the right time. They won a few games they probably shouldn't have. And that's how they ended up making the playoffs. But then, it showed once they made the postseason, they probably didn't belong, especially when they faced off against one of the actual good teams in the NFL. They were put on blast, for lack of a better term. They were ruined on the main stage, and it showed. Their inexperience showed. And
I'll bask in the glory of that game for the rest of my life.
it was a perfect game, and there's no other way to put it. It was an offensively perfect game, and it's hard to be able to say something like that in the game of football. Pokemon asked a good question, or makes a good comment. That's a tough question. Bill always owes the game of football. The draft, however, is different. The reason why, and I guess I'll go into another tangent. The reason why I asked that question is because I make TikTok videos as well as YouTube videos. So I'll go on the stupid app and make a couple of videos talking about my opinions. And I saw a list on Twitter that put Bill Belichick at 10 of general managers in the NFL. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's true at all. So I posted it on TikTok and somehow got in the hands of all the Patriots fans. Somehow it's how shit works, I guess. And they weren't happy about it. And they were going on naming about how Bill Belichick did this. He did that. He did this. It's like, oh, so great. And yeah, exactly. And I saw a very common theme of Patriots fans getting Bill Belichick, the coach, confused with Bill Belichick, the general manager. Like, yeah, sure.
Big
Bill
difference.
Belichick, yes, there's a huge difference. Bill Belichick can turn a guy like Tyquan Thornton or Cole Strange into Pro Bowlers, but that doesn't change the fact that the pick he made as a general manager at the time was not good. Okay, and that's what they get confused. And it's such a frustrating thing. And they'll still find a way to twist it however they can. It drives me nuts, Patriots.
Insufferable fan base. Truly insufferable fan base.
I had a couple commenters say most of the stuff that they were mentioning was in reference to like things that happened between like 2007 to like 2013. It's like things that happened 13 years ago at this point. They find every way to defend how he's been over the last 2 years ever since Brady left, of course. But they one of the main points they kept pointing to was Bill Belichick decided to keep Brady in when when Bledsoe came back. It's like, who's gonna bench Tom Brady after the rookie season he had? I mean, like, who's gonna do that? Anybody in the right? I could have made that decision, and they're giving him credit for it as if it was such a brilliant decision. But yeah,
crazy.
That's my little rant. Anyway, enough of talking about the Patriots. They've lived in our heads enough for the last decade or so now. This is something I've been looking forward to, the hot take part of the show. I heard you have one.
I do.
Let's hear it. Let's hear the hot take, Robyn.
Hot take. It's not really hot, though. I mean, a lot of people are going to think this is hot, but if I put it in context, it is, for me, anyway. The Denver Broncos will win the AFC West. That is my hot take. And it might not really be hot, but I think it is. For the following reasons. Russell Wilson, number one, his resurgence is going to take place in Denver like it did with Peyton Manning. You're bringing in an MVP quarterback, future Hall of Famer, to a team that I think is, everybody looks at the AFC West and it's like, oh yeah, and then the Denver Broncos. But if you look at their roster, they're pretty solid. And in the draft, they went edge, tight end, cornerback, interior defensive line, safety, wide receiver, center guard, interior defensive line, and cornerback. So they went kind of heavy on defense. And I have to say, they got their tight end in the second round, Greg Dulcich from UCLA. I really liked him. I saw him play a couple games and I thought, God, he would really look good in the Bills uniform. So I think that he's going to be a good choice for them. But you got Russell Wilson in that division now, and that changes everything in my opinion. And I also think Kansas City might be due for a year where they have a setback. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether that'll come as a result of injuries or whatever, because they've come a long way without, they've gotten by pretty well in the last few years. But I think they're due for a punch in the mouth. Now, the Chargers, I'm not sure about, but I think I love Herbert. I think he may end up being the best quarterback in that division. Nathaniel Hackett, he's the other one. Mm-hmm. Nate Hackett is the head coach, and we remember Nate, don't we? Well, I don't know if you remember Nate. Do you remember Nate?
I remember, I do. I know Nathaniel Hackett was around here. He spent a decent
How
amount
old
of
were
time.
you?
So I remember, of Nathaniel Hackett, the
Well, right. But
specifics.
that's the thing though. He was the wonder boy when Greg Williams hired him because he was young. I mean, this was like a big deal. And that was like 20 years ago. So, so 20 years ago, he was with the Buffalo Bills. And I thought he did a pretty good job for a Rube, when he was with Greg Williams. I thought he did a pretty good job. He went around the league, he was with a bunch of different teams. But if you see him now, he's matured a lot and he's getting a chance to do something really special in Denver with Russell Wilson. And I think that they have some momentum going in from that. The other thing that some people were talking about is their DC apparently is a first-time DC. His name is Ivero. He coached with the Rams, the Packers, Tampa Bay, and the 49ers. So he's got some good experience. And that's kind of the criticism of the Broncos now, because Hackett's a first-year head coach. Do you think he should have brought in a DC that had some experience? We're going to find out.
Right.
That's going to be interesting. And then I think the AFC West as a whole, and I'm wondering what you're thinking about this, Michael. They may beat each other up a lot. And that may be an advantage for some teams in a tough division like that. The Raiders, they're a question mark as well. But I think this might be Denver's year. And I was just going to say, part of the reason that this is a hot take, and I have to put some context to this and pray that there's nobody that lives around here that's watching it, because I have been tormented for so many years for being a Bills fan. And what I have done in the last few years, every time somebody starts, is I just cover my Josh Allen.
Yep.
And that shuts them up completely. They can't say a word to me because they didn't draft Josh Allen when they had the chance to draft Josh Allen. And so for me to sit here and say all these nice things about the Broncos and that I think that they're going to win the AFC West, I just really don't want any of my friends to see this.
That's funny. I mean, honestly, I would say it's a hot take. I think if you ask most people who's going to win the AFC West, they're pointing the finger toward the Chargers or the Raiders because of all the moves that they made. Of course, the Broncos made their fair share, and they had their big blockbuster with Russell Wilson. But I think everybody looks at the paper rosters of both the Raiders and the Chargers, and they're thinking, how could these teams not win? And then of course the Chiefs. I think everybody's still thinking. Well, some people might still be thinking like, the Chiefs are winning it in my mind until they're dethroned. Like I know there's probably a handful of people that think that as well. So I mean that leaves the Broncos on the outskirts in that kind of conversation. So and someone like myself, I don't really know who's going to win that division, but I've been saying that I think the Broncos will take a year or two before they really get to hit their stride. Russell Wilson gets comfortable there. The defense really comes around because I still think they have a couple of young pieces on that team. And they kind of, take a year or two to really, get on the same page. So I do think it is a hot take. Most people probably would say Chargers, Raiders, and probably Chiefs third, and then Broncos fourth. So, without context, I'd say it's hot.
Yeah, good, because that's what the requirement was. That was the question. And I do think that there's going to have to be some luck involved, but I honestly think the Denver Broncos have been in a situation where they've been beaten around in that division for the last couple of years. And the Chargers, toward the end of last season, they kind of fell off a little bit, at the very end. And it'll be interesting to see, what they put together. The one thing I haven't done, which I intend to do, is go over and look at all of their drafts in more detail. to see, what they were able to fill. But that's my hot take.
I think it's a very, very fair hot take. And a couple people, Bada Bing completely agrees. Casey gets beat up on all year from the division and, gets a little more average. And Denver got really good. So you got somebody agreeing with you. You think the Denver Broncos are taking the division. Pokemon has a question. Will Mahomes get past a bad year or will he be able to grind through? I think Patrick Mahomes will. If there's a piece of the Chiefs that make it out of this year, it's Mahomes. Of course, he's deemed the best quarterback in a lot of different perspectives because what he's done in the past, and I don't think that's going to necessarily change. If anything, this might almost help. Patrick Mahomes if he comes out and he still plays tremendously well without Tyreek Hill. And with Juju Smith-Schuster as his wide receiver one, I think this will only boost his merit. Unfortunately for us Josh Allen fans, trying to push him above Patrick Mahomes, and in my opinion, I still think he's better. But that's a conversation for another day. But Carson, what's going on, man? Nice to see you in here. But yeah, that's I really like the hot take, and here's my hot take, and I think we've been touching on the AFC East a lot. Bills home or not, but the Jets are currently in a much better situation than the Miami Dolphins. I think I don't know if that's hot or not, but I do firmly believe it. Just because, yeah, I think a lot of people would say, the Dolphins they brought in Tyreek Hill, Teron Armstead, they got 2 new running backs, Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds. I do think a lot of people are kind of expecting the Dolphins to be good, and I do believe they're going to be good, but at the time that they're really gearing up is such a bad time. You're getting ready for a push yourselves when the rest of the conference, the entire conference, is also getting ready for a push. And your quarterback situation, which is the most important situation on a football team, of course, is probably the worst out of any given contender in this conference. So they're kind of gearing up at the wrong time. And I feel like if I'm the Jets, I have a quarterback that's still trying to find himself. I just brought in a bunch of young pieces. I've been drafting well for the past couple of years. They'll be ready when I feel like everyone else is going to be dead. And I feel like we did kind of touch on this when we were, together on the draft day. But I just think, I'd rather be gearing up than geared up, if that makes sense. Right. And I feel like that's where the Jets are.
Totally agree with you there. And, Tua, I'm not, it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. Will Teddy Bridgewater be coming in, every time that Tua does, throws 3 or 4 interceptions, or are we out of that mode because Brian Flores isn't there? I mean, I'm not exactly sure what to think. But the one thing that, at least in, from my vision of Tua, I think he has a low ceiling.
Yeah, totally.
And part of it, I think, is mental. And he doesn't see the field. He doesn't read defenses well, still, in my opinion. And they're going to end up having to, find a franchise quarterback at some point. And because, as you know, and we've talked about this before, the quarterback is the center piece, and you have to have a quarterback or you're not going to be able to take that next step. And I don't know, you can have all the speed you want with Tyreek Hill, but if Tua can't throw to him, I don't know what good that's going to be. So we'll see. But the other thing is, I don't know what you think, but I really like Robert Saleh as a head coach. I think he's had a couple of rough years because the team has been so badly. I mean, Adam Gase just flatlined the whole organization. And Robert Saleh is at that point now where I think he's starting to get enough tools and people believing in his system that his team is going to do much better this year. And the Jets, they always play hard. They always play us hard.
They beat the Bengals last year. I mean, they were in games. Yeah, I mean, they beat a team that was in the Super Bowl. So they definitely were. Everybody kind of slightly started to look behind them and saw the Jets making a little bit of noise. But I think at that point, everybody was like, okay, it's just, they're just playing hard. That's what bad teams like to do sometimes. But now they're really starting to, turn the talent around. And I do think, like you mentioned, Robert Saleh is going to be able to, I feel like he's very what's the word I'm looking for? He's kind of like a Sean McDermott in the sense that he's, he brings the team together. It's about the core values. It's about, the family mentality in the locker room. I feel like that's the kind of radiation that Robert Saleh gives off. And that's, that's the most important part. And we've seen what that has done for the Buffalo Bills. And I think it's only a matter of time before Robert Saleh, puts that together with the talent on the field. And it seems like that's becoming the point that they're at. And as far as the Dolphins go, I think this will be a year that, Tua probably will look a little better than he has before just because of all the help he has around him. And I guess the Dolphins will be able to figure out whether or not he is the future, because if he still goes out and he still sucks, having all this around him, then they'll be able to probably finally say, yeah, exactly. They'll be able to say, okay, goodbye. But I guess for one, I would give Tua a lot of credit because I do think he's in a situation where I'd feel unwanted if I was Tua. I mean, Deshaun Watson, there was all the talk about, Justin Herbert not being taken by the Dolphins. It feels like I feel like his franchise has made it very clear that they've been trying to move on from him as much or as often as possible. And for, a young kid like that, it probably doesn't do well for the mental side of things, but I think he's handled it pretty well. So for someone that's hated on Tua a lot, I give him a lot of credit in that sense.
Indeed.
That being said, that's a hot take, but I like the question. I think it comes to QB experience. Tua takes it for me, and Miami has the edge. Jets need time to mold. I agree. I think, and that's and that's kind of the premise of the whole thing. Like, I think the Jets taking the time to mold now while everyone else is killing each other, I think that's the perfect time to, gear up, like I mentioned. Joey, either way, Tom Brady is going to be there next year, so it doesn't matter what happens with the Tortello thing. I don't even want to have that thought cross my mind, so I think we'll just move on from that. That's just not a fun thought. All right, well, that leads us to the most exciting part of the show, at least in my opinion, the quiz game. And Robyn has been going on all for the last couple of days about how she's not very confident in herself when it comes to the quiz game, and you are definitely selling yourself short. I think you're gonna do very well. It's the quiz game. You're smart when it comes to football. Give yourself some credit. At least give yourself a shot before you tear yourself down.
All right.
So let's pull up the quiz game. So if you're new around here, the quiz game is pretty damn simple. 5 NFL quiz questions. Question categories include recent events, stats, history, draft, and football IQ. You can choose an easy, medium, hard for each question. Easy equals 10 points, medium equals 20 points, hard equals 30 points, 15 seconds per question, but I'm relatively lenient about it. And you get the fight to be etched on the caveman. Oh, that's a spotlight. Caveman quiz game leaderboards. We got Jake in first, 60 points, Justice in second with 50, Z-Bot in third with 40. So either way, you're going to be in the top 5. Let's see.
Jake is a beast.
Jake had one hell of a run, and he is the leader for 2 weeks straight. So if you could dethrone him, stop him from moving to 3 weeks, you have an opportunity.
Lay it on me.
All right. So first question is a recent events question. Would you like the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Easy. I'm going easy all the way.
Okay, easy question. Where did A.J. Brown get traded this offseason?
A.J. Brown?
Yes.
Went to Philadelphia.
Correct. A.J. Brown did go to Philadelphia, and it just happened 2 days ago or 3 days ago, whatever it was. He got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's 10 points on the board. You're already on the board. You're getting automatically put on the leaderboard, so automatically you're looking good to be. Second question. We have the stats question. This is an interesting one. Do you want to go the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Definitely easy.
Okay. So the easy stats question is going to be, which rookie wide receiver broke the rookie receptions record in 2021?
Rookie wide receiver. Ooh. I'm blanking out. Can you give me a hint?
He's an interdivisional rival.
Interdivisional rivals. I'm blanking out.
It was. You want to give it one shot?
No.
Jalen Waddle It was Jalen Waddle.
Oh, yes. His name would have never come up in my brain, though.
He caught like 1,000 passes, but he got 104, broke the record because he was just catching Tua's dump offs constantly. But yes, it was Jalen Waddle that did break the record. You guys are saying Jefferson because I kind of phrased the question poorly. It should have been last season, what I meant.
Oh, yeah. Justin Jefferson. He had a great year the year
Yeah,
before.
He had one hell of a season. And, you know, for Jamar Chase to come on and have a season that was, in my opinion, even better was remarkable. But anyway, staying on track. For the third question, we have the history question. Do you want to go easy, medium, or hard?
So I'm old, so I should get that. Easy, please.
Okay, easy. Easy question is, how many times did Brett Favre, well, that should say retire. How many times did Brett Favre retire?
Three times?
3 times is correct. He did retire 3 times. He retired with the Packers first, the Jets second, and then he retired with the Vikings third. And he was retiring at a like one retirement per year basis from like 2007 to 2010. So you are correct. Right. 3 times is the answer. Here you go. You got 20 points on the board. You have 2 questions remaining. Guys. So for the fourth question, this is the draft question. Would you like the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Easy.
Easy it is. All right. The easy question is, who is the second overall selection in the 2022 NFL Draft?
So we had, who went first on the board? I wasn't listening to the draft live. I'm drawing a blank. I can tell you who did in 2018.
All right, good enough. Who was it in 2018? Why not?
Saquon Barkley?
It was Saquon Barkley in 2018. That was the year of the quarterbacks, and Dave Gettleman decided to draft a running back when every other quarterback was out there on the board. So you know what? No, we'll give you the answer.
I don't even remember who drafted second.
It was the Lions took Aiden Hutchinson.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't remember that either.
Yes, Aiden Hutchinson, Dave says. Yes, correct. But I'll give you 10 points anyway. That's pretty, 2018, that's even longer. Oh, why not? 10 more points on the board, 30 points.
For the elderly. That's what happened.
There we go. 30 points for Robyn. Going into the final question, would you like the easy, would you like the medium, or the hard? This is the
I better go easy because I can't even make these.
Okay. So the easy question for the football IQ is, if a field goal kick goes above or over the upright, does it still count?
Ooh. Yeah.
You are correct. It does still count.
Yeah.
If it goes, the rule states if it goes over or above the upright, supposedly the upright is a limitless, like
straight line.
Yes, it's pretty much just a limitless straight line, but it doesn't stand as a boundary. It's just like a marker for the ball to land in. So pretty much if it goes over it, it does make it. So correct, Dave. Yes, is the answer. Robyn, you get 40 points. That's pretty nice.
Andy Robbins on the board.
4 out of 5 you got for the night.
Big board.
So now that would put you, let's see if I can pull it back up. Where is it? That puts you tied with Z-Bot. Now you're tied with Z-Bot. Tied exactly. So you did a lot, but I think you really sold yourself heavily short for this quiz game.
I feel better. I feel better now. But I am holding true to the elderly not having good short-term memory. It's true.
Look, you did awesome, and I think at least you gave it your best shot. I think you could have gotten some of the medium or the hard ones if you would have tried. But
next time,
I'll give you a medium one. Let's see how you do with the medium.
All right.
Any other questions? You want the stats, the history, the draft?
History.
History? Okay. The medium history question is, what year did the NFL move the extra point back 13 yards?
Oh, criminy. That wasn't that long ago. 13 yards. I'm just going to be guessing here, but I'll say 2013.
It was 2015. You were close. 2015 it was, but you were close.
Those years are all a blank.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially as Bills fans, they'll definitely blend in. The decade of the 2010 certainly blend in for the way things went for us. So I don't blame you. Honestly, most of these questions I've been looking
like
up. Like a lot of them I know, but I've only known them because I looked them up. But yeah, there you go. You managed to get 40 points. Pretty solid job, Robyn. It was a blast to have you on tonight. It was really fun. We had very solid conversation.
Thank you very much. I enjoy your podcast so much. I'll come back anytime.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to having. I'm definitely going to have a lot of the earlier guests that I have on now again later on, because it's still, like I mentioned, kind of ironing out the wrinkles in the whole show. So I definitely want to give everyone more of a fair shot with the quiz game. And, once I really square things away, definitely want to give some of my early guests another shot at it.
Okay.
But it was a very good time having you on, Robyn. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Of course, I appreciate you hopping on, and I definitely, guys, for anybody that was able to hop in the chat tonight, give your answers, give your responses. I appreciate you guys joining. It means the world to support, the show. And Bada Bing says, "Great interview, peace, guys." Thank you, Bada Bing. We wouldn't do it without your guys' support, and I think I speak for not only Robyn, myself, and anybody that creates content for the fan base or in the Bills Mafia community. We wouldn't do it without you guys watching and supporting. So we all tremendously appreciate it. So yeah, thank you, Robyn. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace. Go Bills.